outcome to this process.
Absolutely. So swift that our write-up of this panel is incorrect. Because at the time that we set this up, it was like, and we'll be very interested to hear what Paizo's management has to say. And then before we even had time to do the show, they'd already answered. So
well, and we can talk about why that is, like why
sure.
So which is
absolutely yeah. We'll get to all of that. Let's start a little earlier though. Let's kind of like go back to the early parts of this, if you don't mind, and say if you could let us know, like, what were the circumstances that led to this? What was the situation that led to Paizo's workers even considering such a thing?
Well, so for one thing, we have to clarify that there has been talk about unionization. Not just.
Well, it looks like we may have a bit of a hold up here on the sound. Jason's gone.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, everything's fine now.
Nikki, have you got it?
Yeah, we're good now.
So,
am I the one that's gone down?
What happened? So there's been talk about a union in the role-playing game industry for a very long time, and in fact, there were folks meeting and talking about forming a union when COVID hit, and the quarantine sort of put all those plans on hold as we all kind of went home to our homes and started to
right.
and dealt with all of that. But about 6 weeks ago, two long-serving and highly respected members of the community service team, including Sarah Marie, the community service manager, the customer service manager, and she was dismissed by management. And then Diego, another long-serving and highly respected member of that team, quit out of solidarity.
Right.
This kicked off kind of a PR firestorm for Paizo. And there were a lot of accusations from about the working conditions at Paizo, the low pay. Most of us work for pretty low salaries, especially considering the really expensive work.
Right.
And there were a lot of accusations made about bad treatment of, for example, our LGBTQ employees, some of whom had just quit because they couldn't take it at the company anymore. And many of these accusations were very much apparent. And the fans and the freelancers that helped make Paizo work really came out strong. And this all happened right at Gen Con, which was, like I say, about 6 weeks ago. And
right, just a few days before, if I remember correctly.
Right, that's right. And so that was kind of the initial inciting event, let's call it that. And while the freelancers were protesting, and we'll talk later about the freelancers played and how this whole thing happened, but the freelancers were protesting and calling for a number of demands and changes to Paizo. Well, meanwhile, behind the scenes, a lot of us grew up in union families, you know. I have a union story from my dad, and I've been in before. Jenny Jerzabski, who's also a union family, born and bred, she's a developer on Starfighter now. She was on the organized play team at the time, and she's since transferred over. Well, she reached out to me and said, like, what do you think about a union? Like, yeah, the only thing I felt we had to make sure was it had to be for everybody at Paizo. There's kind of an artificial division sometimes at the company between the people that actually make the union, like the developers, the designers, the artists, the managers, and the people that help make the company function, warehouse, IT, customer service, right? And we're like, we have to make sure that it includes everybody, because if we don't, management will use that division against us, and they'll put us against each other. And Jenny agreed, and about a week or so later, she invited me to the Discord server, and there was already a ton of people there. Like, I was not the first person recruited, nor was I the last. And we started gathering people, and we knew that we had to have 50% plus one to pass a union vote. Well, but we wanted some insurance, right, to make sure that we had more than the minimum in case folks got cold feet or whatever. And so we figured out that we're about 50 eligible employees, 50 eligible union employees in Paizo out of our total employees. Big managers.
Come back to that as well, because I have a couple of questions about how that division was made. But sure, go ahead.
Yeah, good. So that gave us a list of 50 people, and I can't tell you how much easier this has been to do because the list was short, right? Like we only had to try to recruit 50 people, not an Amazon warehouse or John Deere or anything like big. And so we could make a database, we could make a spreadsheet.
Your mic is on.
We could start going through the list, and pretty soon we had 30, and then we had 35, and we elected an organizing committee that started getting us in touch with other larger union organizations so we could have paperwork and the federal legal requirements and so on. We hooked up with the Communication Workers of America. All this is happening. We hadn't revealed anything yet. We hadn't get all of our ducks in a row before we said anything publicly.
Right.
And we started to get anti-union training from our CWA representatives, and they didn't want us to go public until we had a super majority. They wanted us to have 70% of all eligible employees publicly in support of the union before we could go public, and we got that done. Almost, I believe it was exactly 1 month.
Okay.
Coincidence. We did not plan that, but that's when the final signatures came in. And the next day was, I believe, a Thursday, something like the 12th of October, something like that. And we announced that morning that we were the United Paizo Workers. And that's
okay. Before we go any farther with that, let's go back and hit a couple, fill in some details from that, because that's the story from there gets even more interesting.
Yeah.
But first of all, so the freelancer organized activity was not something that came from Paizo's, from any of your side, right? The pressure that they were putting on, because my understanding is they started to do a slowdown and they were withholding work based on what they considered to be the inappropriate treatment of Sarah Marie and other people at Paizo.
Yeah, that's very important to touch on, and I'm glad that you brought it up. The freelancers did not ask us for approval, and we did not approach them. It was a completely sort of parallel development situation. The freelancers, led by Jessica Redikob, who kind of helped organize all of that, there were 50 of them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a huge, Paizo can't make books without those people. We hire freelancers to write most of our books. And as you say, the freelancers withholding their labor. They stopped writing on anything that they had been assigned. They refused to take any new contract. And as a month went by, that's a lot of books. Like, we have to assign new books. And they refused to turn in work they'd already completed. Well, the deadlines got pretty intimidating pretty quickly.
Sure.
And the freelancers had a list of concrete action they wanted to see Paizo take. Some of that was easily done. Some of that was harder, and it was going to take a much longer time. They included things like investigations of terminations, right, from some sort of outside party. Maybe some kind of diversity training for people in management to ensure that all of our employees have an equal voice at the table, are treated respectfully. Some kind of salary review process, and also separately salary transparency, so that everybody's salaries are clearly known. Things like working from home, for example, or remote work. So anyway, they had a long list, and that was. I did not envy Eric Mona and the other members of the management of the leadership team, because it was never particularly clear how much Paizo would have to do to satisfy that group, right? Like, they could do some of it right away, but things would take a very long time, longer than the company could go without freelancers.
Without having any freelancers work, right? Yeah.
So that was a tough situation, but PW helped solve that.
I understand. Now, has your union kind of like taken up common cause? Is your list of things to discuss with Paizo's management, kind of like of a piece with what the freelancers were asking for, or do you have a separate list that may have some crossover, but not, that there may still be freelancer concerns that wouldn't be addressed by your union.
Okay, so on the day that UPW announced its existence, Jessica and the other freelancers amended their demands to 1, recognize the union, and then the freelancers would go
Okay, right, sure.
Okay, and so that immediately produced a huge handle, a way for management to get out of its current situation. All they had to do was recognize the union, and everybody goes back to manuscripts get turned in, new contracts get assigned, and we're back in business, right?
Right.
Now, so that's the short. The long answer is yes. Like we have a lot of overlapping. In many ways, I think that the freelancers they can't see behind the Paizo curtain. They don't really know what's going on inside the company. They only know what they hear from public statements or something. So some of their requests and demands were kind of founded on just they were misunderstandings. Right. There were things. Okay, well, we want this particular employee to not be involved in the community. We don't want this person. Well, that person wasn't really involved with the community much anyway. So things like that. But other issues we know more about just because we're getting paychecks every month. We know exactly how much we make. Right.
You're in the office. Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, the freelancer goals helped to inform our goals. We're still figuring out exactly what we're doing surveys amongst all the employees so that our negotiating team will be able to see exactly what. And a lot of those things, though, are what you would expect. We want pay equity, right? We want. Many of us have really adapted to working from home. We've been working from home for 2 years now. We're still putting out everything that we've been scheduled to put out. We haven't reduced our publications at all. And so now some folks want to go into the office. They've got reasons to do that. That's awesome. But others of us like working from home. And some of us are thinking, well, listen, if you can't raise our salaries, we don't know if that's true or not. We have to get into the books to tell. But if we're going to get paid below living wage, let us move somewhere where that salary could go a lot farther, right?
And work remotely.
Exactly, let us work remotely. If our job is already online all the time, well then can we just pack up and move? Like let us do. And other folks have different reasons. Maybe they've gone out, they want to be near aging parents, or they've got a million other reasons why they might want to move. And we've shown that we can do
the disability community, the disabled community has been, kind of like using this as an example in a lot of their public statements recently of saying, we've just shown how easy it is for companies to work with the vast majority of their staff, like not coming into the office. That's a thing that we have been requesting, that kind of accommodation. Your argument that that's not possible is no longer really, holding any water, because we've all been doing it for the last 18 months.
This is a great point, by the way, too. Yes, like we could make our office much more open to employees with disability if we could make it a remote office, if we could make that a possibility. And this would be good for the diversity in our workplace, and it would help us make the games that we want to make. Like Paizo is an incredibly progressive company. We produce these, we've got, I mean, you're talking about employees and players and GMs with disability. We hired disability readers and writers to help us make those products in our books. The Grand Bazaar that we just put out has a 2-page spread of disability magic items so that you can play characters in the game. Starfinder's got them too. And so we need to hire people that understand and can speak authentically about that experience so that they can put those characters in the game, and then our players will see themselves in the game. Right. And remote work would help us do that.
Yes. So you're saying now that you said that Pathfinder had about 80 employees total that you were discussing, of which 50 or so were eligible.
Yeah.
Obviously, first, to like put that in context for people, unfamiliar with this side perhaps of the tabletop industry, that's an enormous number, right? I mean, that's, maybe WotC. I'm not even sure the percentage of WotC that works on D&D may not be that large, right? I mean, that may.
I can answer that.
Okay.
WotC's role-playing division is smaller than us in
Yes.
terms of its personnel. Now,
Right.
if you add in all the magic and everything else, they're much larger. But their
Sure,
role,
of course. But I'm saying, well, even if you take the percentage of your company that's the administration side or whatever for that, the WotC's percentage of administration that matches the percentage that D&D represents of the company, even then, Pathfinder Paizo probably still comes out
that's correct.
ahead in numbers. So one of the things that made you guys kind of like the ideal test bed for this sort of
Yeah.
thing is this is the company that like could plausibly do this from this side.
Yeah.
But I have a question about that, if only because it's very difficult. Obviously, this is a union that is for the workers at Paizo, and defining exactly who is a worker and who is management in
Yes.
a company that runs, something with tabletop games. There are some very blurry lines at about like the editor level, and line developer and that sort of thing, of exactly which side of those that you fall on. How did you make that decision to even come up with the number of 30, and like where did you come up with a specific bright red line to say,
Yeah.
this far and no farther, you're not eligible anymore?
Yeah, good. It's a very good question. And we did not know at first. Like this
Right.
is exactly the sort of thing that we needed help with. So this is where our CWA rep Ted came in and met with the organizing committee, and they talked about those laws. What it came down to was the theory of direct reports.
Okay.
Are you a person to whom somebody else directly reports, right? And if you are not eligible for union membership.
Okay.
So of those 80 people that make up Paizo, both the Pathfinder, Starfinder, organized play, everybody, creative team, tech team, operations, about 30 took other people's reports immediately, right? Like somebody,
Right, yeah.
but about 50 of us did not. And that might seem like a weird split, because that seems like a lot of management for an employee, for 80 people to have 30 people that are in management. But Paizo is a lot of little departments, right? Like
Sure.
you've got the Starfinder developers, you've got the Pathfinder developers, you have the design team, the art team, the editing team, and all of these people have their own managers, right? And you kind of need it to be that way. Like you can't just put all of the developers under one roof and have one manager for all of them, because Starfinder has different needs and different obligations than the Pathfinder team does. And the best way to have a Starfinder, the best way to keep Starfinder flourishing is to give it a manager who knows and loves Starfinder.
Sure.
Rather than somebody who's
Yeah, I don't even think it's a question so much of like, 30 sounds like too much, so much as it's a question of like the job requirements within, like every tabletop company that I've worked with are so sort of like kind of vague and ever evolving that it seems like you could very easily wind up, switching back and forth between those. Very easily, right? Like if like I take a position to line develop a particular line, which means I have thus and so many, I have 3-4 people who report to me, and then that project comes to an end and I might be back on the other side, right? It's like if I go back from, if I was line developer of a line that was itself temporary, and then I go back to working for the bigger side or something, and I've changed sides, am I in and out of the union at that point, or?
Well, maybe in that way, Paizo's benefits the fact that we have relatively few but long-standing lines, right? Like,
Okay.
Paizo's not going to just create a new game and do it for a year. Like we thought that Starfighter might be like that when we first were pitching the idea, and then like 1 million people bought it and we won a bunch of awards. So instead, a 1-year game became an ongoing thing with permanent staff, right? So we have some stability maybe because of our size. So like I'm a senior developer, but nobody answers to me. Like I don't supervise anybody, and I hire a freelancer, but I don't supervise anybody. And so
within the company, if you bring in a freelancer, you may work, you're editing their work or whatever, but
freelancers don't count, right? Exactly.
Right.
So we've got like, I answer to Ron Lundin, who's Pathfinder manager and developing manager, and I answer to Jason Keeley, who's the Starfinder developing manager. And then I answer to Adam Daigle, who's the managing developer. Because of my weird job where I work on both games at the same time, that means I have a lot of bosses, basically.
Right, sure.
But those people, their roles are pretty straightforward. They're not going to suddenly not be managers anymore. Like we have a pretty clear. So it was made relatively simple, maybe because we had so many folks, because we do have a large number of people. We have to have clearly established managers, right? Like you can't just you're not just coming in and being a manager you're a manager.
You're a manager when you're okay.
Yeah.
I have one more question just from this portion of the discussion, which is the CWA. How did you why did you pick them?
Yeah.
I actually went and looked them up before having this interview, and that's a union that was originally founded by telephone operators.
That's right.
Which is like the Simpsons reference, right? It's like jazz dancers and nuclear technicians, sort of thing. It's like, oh, we're telephone operators and game designers. Okay, sure, whatever. So like, why the CWA, and then how did you like reach out to them? Like, what's the process of doing that? If I'm another company that's wants to reach out, wants to get that information, how do I go about that process?
Okay, well, first off, let's answer that question because that is super important. So, if you are in a tabletop role playing related or similar company, adjacent company, like maybe you're in a small video game shop that's here in Seattle, or miniatures gaming or board gaming or any of that stuff, and you are interested, then you should contact at Paizo Workers. We're on Twitter at Paizo Workers, our website, unitedpaizoworkers.org. And we've got a whole section there on the website about how can I help, who do I contact?
Okay.
Now, so and we would love to have that conversation.
We'll put that into the chat here somewhere. I think make sure that's found online.
Now, I'm not on the organization committee. I'm volunteering. Like I kind of helped out to give a lot of interviews. The day after we announced, I did a Facebook Live video with Owen Stevens for Mike Lafferty's Banff podcast, and that kind of made me the unofficial spokesman for the UPW.
That'll teach you.
So yeah, exactly. And so I've done about a dozen interviews since then. But so I wasn't in the room when the organization committee figured out, like when they had that conversation about kind of where to go and how to do this. But we chose the CWA because they've got media and entertainment contacts already. They are very large. They are the largest. They're a large and highly respected union. And here in Seattle, we had easy access. So like Ted, our CWA rep, he's a sort of division rep. He's in Portland. And so we had easy access. They were big, and they were able to give us a lot of resources, which is exactly what we want. So now, for example, as we start figuring out our negotiating team and stuff, CWA can give us a professional negotiator whose job is to negotiate with management about union contracts. And we're like so thankful, right? Because
to help you organize your effort to
and a man who defends himself in court has a fool for a client, right? Like
right. Yeah.
We know, like, we are not lawyers. We make games for a living. So let's get a professional labor lawyer in, and CWA could help us do that. And there's AFL-CIO and everything. So we had a lot of options, and there's a lot of now that we've been recognized, we're actually meeting with different local chapters of the CWA. We had our first one last night, and we're meeting and deciding which one of those chapters to affiliate with.
Okay.
So the CWA was as kind of the broad umbrella, but now we get to pick people, right? And that's important.
Right. And do you feel? I mean, do you think the CWA understands like the game industry at the level that like is going to be helpful to you, or is this something where you've had to kind of like inform them? This is not like we're being on behalf of a newspaper staff or something like that. So
we have definitely been educating them a little bit, but I want to underline, like Ted was super helpful to us when he wants us to succeed. So for example, like CWA didn't want to let us go public until we had enough numbers that we could present ourselves as basically having already won, right? Like once we came out with 35 people on our list, but the numbers went up from there. and pretty soon it became pretty obvious to management that even without the freelancer issue, they were going to lose a vote. We were
Right.
going to lose a vote, and we'd already filed with the National Relations Board because CWA helped us navigate all of that. And so we already
Right.
had.
So even if they had not recognized you, you still could have,
That's right.
gone through and gotten the representation on your own. The fact that they recognized you shortened that process and made it considerably friendlier,
That's right.
I think. But if it had been disputed, it was still within your power to move on without Paizo's management.
That's right. And
Right.
so, but your question about like the CWA understand gaming, the incredible flood of public support for UPW stunned CWA. Like they
Excellent.
couldn't believe it
Interesting.
because we think about Paizo, like we depend on subscriptions and organized play and stuff, right? Like we have spent the
Hmm.
last 20 years building an incredibly loyal customer base. And so naturally, when the people that make those, hey, we deserve to eat better than ramen every night. Like the fans were like, "You're right, you do." And the support and the freelancer partnership, like it's I don't know if anything like that has ever happened, but because normally freelancers are used against employees by management, right?
Sure. Right.
When the employees say, "Well, we're going to withhold labor, or we're going to unionize," management would say, "Okay, well, we'll just hire the freelancers to do your job." But now they couldn't because the freelancers were arm in arm with us, right?
Right.
When we got and Paizo's management went quiet for about a week, and that's totally expected. Like that, we should not.
One would, yeah, you'd be startled if they didn't.
That's
That would
right.
almost be mismanagement if they didn't just kind of like, okay, wait, we all need to have some very serious discussions about
Yeah,
this.
exactly right. And then about a week later, in fact, I think it was 8 days, they announced within a joint state. There was some negotiation behind the scenes. There was some quiet conversation behind the scenes between UPW and Paizo management. A negotiation about exactly who and who might not be counted as eligible.
Mm.
But once that was figured out, and it was a very small and easily resolved issue, they put out a joint statement a week later, and Ted and the CWA were floored. They just couldn't believe that we got it so quickly and so effectively. And
Right.
I think
Which speaks well of Paizo's management. I mean,
that's right.
none of this should be, the fact that I'm talking to you here today should not be suggesting that we're not, first of all, enormous fans of Paizo and everything that they've done, or think that like Paizo has, their management has mishandled this, I think, in any particular way. I mean, obviously there's the nature of the disputes between you to
Yeah,
start out with that
yeah,
still need resolving. But I think the fact that they turned it around as quickly as they did
yeah,
and did so with you
yeah.
certainly speaks well to the potential of straightening out any other issues that exist between you.
That's right. That's right. And and I'm glad. I'm glad this worked out this way because like Eric is a good guy. Like Eric Mona, he wants to do the right thing. And Lynn and Lisa Stevens,
Mhm.
who helped who created Paizo and who has led us for so many years. She's kind of mostly retired now, but
Right.
she's still officially the CEO. Um, her heart is in the right place. Like she wants to do the right thing, and so all 100% credit to Paizo's leadership team who agreed to do the right thing and help make this company better.
That's excellent. All right. So, well, where does it stand now? I guess where do have those discussions begun? Is there anything that you can tell us about like how that's going? I'm obviously this is not a airing the negotiations in public, but
Well, the first thing that happened was because they recognized the union, every one of us now became protected employees. We live
right,
in Washington, which is an at-will employment state. It's a terribly regressive labor laws here in Washington. And prior to this, any one of us could be fired for absolutely no reason. Management did not have to tell us why we were fired. They could just say, pack your shit, you're out. Well,
right,
that can't happen anymore. Now that we are part of a union, we are protected by federal law, and we are no longer at-will employees. So number one victory right there, right?
sure, right,
But we are in the process of doing a bunch of things internally at UPW. We're doing some surveys to figure out what our priorities are when it comes time to negotiation. What do we want most? What are there any slip through the cracks that haven't made it onto the list? we're going to we'll be electing that negotiation team. The other thing that's happened is well, as soon as the UPW was recognized by Paizo, my mailbox as a developer got flooded with requests from freelancers looking for work, right? Saying, "Hey, we're back."
Sure.
And manuscripts got turned in, new contracts got assigned. So we I think Paizo put out a recent statement. I think a day or two ago that was a legal statement that had to be put out about moving forward. Everything we've heard from management has been positive, and many of our mid managers, like the people that aren't the leadership team, but they do take reports, are fully in support of what we're doing as well. So it's been a very cooperative, and I'm very optimistic it's going to happen. We have to.
So the freelancers as a group, basically, when you said they changed their sole demand basically to being to recognize you, having done that, are the freelancers themselves now completely satisfied, or do they still have a list basically of like, okay, now that you did that, let's like talk about the other things we were still.
I believe that the freelancer concerted action is open.
Okay.
They change now. They would still like to, but they are not withholding any labor over.
Right. Okay.
They're
working, I think, on the presumption that you'll take care of the if you get what you want, it will mostly, if not entirely, cover what they wanted.
Yeah, and I think that we can basically now that the Paizo employees have a seat at the table, the freelancers are sort of trusting us, and that's important because the freelancers did all of that with no expectation of any reward on their part. In fact, It was actually quite harmful to their careers. Like, they're not getting paid.
Sure.
And they're placing their freelancer careers in jeopardy. Not everybody was so excited about the idea of freelancers who contracted for work and even completed that work and then refusing to turn in the manuscript. Like, that's a hit to a lot of folks. So they were putting themselves in jeopardy. And so now I feel, and I'm speaking personally here, this is our opportunity in the union now to pay the freelancers back. Because the freelancers have issues they want to see. And now that we're in the union, we can fight for that. Like, we can fight for better freelancer pay rates, for example. We can fight for more time for the freelancers to complete assignments. Because some of those deadlines are very, very short. We can push for.
We are all familiar with crunch. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So.
And we can maybe get some play testing time built into that freelancer schedule, which I would love to see because that would help us make better games, right? So there's a lot of ways that we can help get some. We can make sure that our diverse freelancer pool is they have the tools they need to properly work in our environment. So yeah, there's a lot of ways that we as the union can help the freelancers in trust and solidarity for everything they've helped do for us.
Sure. Okay. All right. Well, in that case, obviously we can't, discuss, like how the negotiations directly are going.
Yeah.
But the last set of questions that I have here are mostly about the possible ramifications of what it is that Paizo has done for the rest of the industry.
Yeah.
Right, like when the very first announcement from the UPW about choosing to organize in the first place came out, I immediately saw, following it on my Twitter feed, like the Ralph Wiggum on the bus meme, right, of like the chuckle, I'm in danger kind of thing with WotC employees, WotC management, like over the top of it, right? Are you aware of any other company in the industry that is doing this sort of thing that? Is looking to follow your lead in this, or
so there's what I can reveal and what I can't, right? Because
sure.
not a lot of union organizing, because of climate, a lot of union organizing has to be done on the quiet,
of course,
until it's. So what I can say is
you can tell us. No,
we have been approached. Let's put it like that.
Sure.
Multiple groups have come to us asking for our story, to hear how we did what we did, and to get some advice and suggestions. and to get some support. And our organizing committee is helping with all of that. Wizards is a bit of a special case. Wizards employees get paid over twice what we get paid.
Mm-hmm.
And the motivation to unionize at Wizards is just, quite frankly, much less. And so I would not put too much, personally, not put too much stock in the meme that you saw. My version of that was the guy looking over his shoulder, right? Meme. And it was Wizards of the Coast is the girl that's getting rejected, and
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So
Sure.
That's delightful to see, and it's funny, but I wouldn't hold your breath on that. I mean, if I was making and listen, and I'm not saying this in any sort of mean spirit. Like, virtually every manager I've had at Paizo now works at Wizards.
Right. Yep.
Judy Bauer, my managing editor, is now editing Dungeons and Dragons. Liz Liddell, who was my senior editor, is now editing Magic the Gathering.
Mm-hmm.
And Amanda Heyman, who was Starfinder managing developer, now working on Dungeons and Dragons.
Right.
Senior developer there.
If people watching this are not aware, this is a terribly incestuous industry, and we all have worked for each other at different times. It's the same small group.
And that is fantastic. Like,
sure.
I am congratulate, but now, like, Amanda's buying a house. Like, nobody at Paizo can afford to buy a house.
Okay.
I can barely make rent, man. Like, that's when I was hired at Paizo, and here I'm speaking my own personal experience here. When I was hired at Paizo as an editor 3.5 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
my starting salary was $38,000.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't have a roommate. I'm a little bit too old to go on the roommate market, right? I've got a car. I have student loans, and I was living in the poorest neighborhood in Seattle metropolitan area. I had a 1-hour commute to the office. If I didn't get freelancer contracts every month, I didn't eat.
Right.
I didn't have a food budget. So, and my salary was not the lowest entry. That was customer service folks, warehouse staff. They came in with less, and it's criminal. So, but folks at Wizards, they get paid better, as they should. They deserve to get paid. And
sure.
So they might have, I don't know. I don't know. I don't talk to people at Wizards, but I suspect that they just have less motivation to use.
There have been, I know, multiple efforts through the years to develop some sort of a freelancers guild or a freelancers union to organize freelancers as a group. I'm familiar with at least 2 or 3 different efforts that kind of like came up and then faded away over the last 20 years that I've been doing this. Is that something that you think there is a possibility for now? Is that something that Paizo's success can, perhaps inspire a more coherent effort on behalf of freelancers?
I wish we had Jessica on here. She'd be better able to answer. Jessica Redekop has kind of been the organizer of the whole freelancer Paizo accountability movement.
Okay.
The thing that it makes the union last is that it has a legal structure.
Right.
Like, it's a recognized part of federal, and a lot of these, there's worker co-ops. We've been in touch with some worker co-ops in California and elsewhere that are game focused. But a lot of these things are kind of overly dependent on personalities that come and go, and they don't have that permanent legal structure that a union has, right? They're not enshrined in federal law. And so it becomes really hard to stay durable in an industry like ours. I would love to see some kind of freelancer organization. I don't know what that would look like. I'm wise enough to know my ignorance in that regard. But I do think that Paizo, because we are big and because we have a long lifespan and because we employ so many freelancers at once, that's created a large body of people that might be enough to hit critical mass and form some kind of full-time ongoing freelancer
To
organization.
establish standards
Yeah,
for
that's right.
for working, not just for pay, but also for working conditions, that sort of
Yeah,
thing. Also, I mean, there, as far as I'm aware, aren't any similar successes like Paizo's really, even on the video game side of the industry, where people are paid better, but frequently are being asked to work under even more grotesque conditions, and much more, like have that at will employment situation be considerably more tenuous.
that's right.
And so, is that also a side that is kind of like reaching out to you guys to be like, how did you figure this out?
There is a wave. You don't have to be me to notice. There is a wave of organized labor activity going on in our country right now. Been a series of high profile labor
Hmm.
actions over the last couple of years. I think that the quarantine, the pandemic, has woken up a lot of people to their labor situation. They don't want to go work. They don't want to. They were forced to not work for a while, and
Right.
now they need to go back into the labor market. They don't want to work for peanuts anymore, right? Like they
Right.
want to be treated with respect, and I think that every time one of these labor actions takes place, it helps accelerate the overall process and the momentum of the entire. Um, I would love to see UPW be the tip of the spear and see more of these labor actions happen at other companies. It needs to happen. It's needed to happen for a long time. We love making these games, but that doesn't mean that we need to live in poverty to do it, right? Like that's an unfair trade. We shouldn't be asked to
Right.
do. We should.
And once again, if you're not living in poverty, if you're working for Blizzard or something, you're not living in poverty until, like your job suddenly gets canned after you were putting in 80-hour weeks on crunch time, right? It's
Yes,
it's not simply a matter of salary. It's also a matter of like the
right.
conditions under which you're employed. So,
Absolutely right. And crunch time is now it's different in different parts of the company, and some parts of Paizo, especially editing, the editing team, have really suffered incredible crunch over the last few years, as Pathfinder Second Edition playtest and then the actual book came out. The editorial and the Kingmaker project that we're doing right now, all of those things have created incredible crunch. And you hear these horror stories at Blizzard and elsewhere. So yeah, absolutely. I would love. We need to address that.
okay, we're coming down to the last few minutes of this here. So, first of all, I want to say if you've got kind of like a final a prediction or anything else that you want to say about it. And then I think we're going to throw this open for the last few minutes to questions from the viewers here. If there's anything that you think we missed in this discussion.
I don't
Um,
think so. We've covered everything. I just want to really recommend out and follow us at Paizo Workers. That's a way for us to continue to tell this union story that we hope will spread and that we want you folks to be a part of. If maybe you've never played, we have a lot of folks at Metatopia who probably never played a Pathfinder or Starfinder in their lives. But listen, we are the only unionized RPG workshop in the world. And if you approve of that, if you want to see more of that, like go out and buy the core rule book, man. Like we got a pocket edition and it's a fantastic book. Like and you won't be disappointed. And like support your union. And it we want to continue to do this and we'll do it more.
getting those final shots into the indie crowd. All right. Yeah, sure. Why not? Mickey, we got anything in the chat that we want to throw out as questions we missed?
Yeah. 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 Good. Yes. The short answer is yes. Um, Sexual harassment, but also a hostile work environment that makes our LGBTQ employees quit and walk out. Like that shit's got to change. And when that happens, it forces wonderful employees whom I respect and learn from to leave. And we need to reverse that process. And sexual harassment there was a couple of incidents before I even got hired. And so that's been an ongoing concern. Now, my understanding is that I don't know of any sexual harassment issues that immediately prompted the union. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't exist, because a lot of these things work in silo. But the union as a group will be able to get all of these issues and negotiate them much more than one single person can. So yes, we will be able to make that. And that's important to all of us, because we want our coworkers, our colleagues, to be treated respectfully and fairly. And as a union, we'll have access to one personal guy does. A lot of these accusations siloed. They get filed behind an HR person, for example.
Right.
Get put in a
Which is
file.
part of the reason to go through it publicly in this process for it is to,
And this is touched on a related issue that might be relevant to the person who asked this question. We haven't had a stable human resources person at Paizo for years. We've had like one a year for 3 years. And that's because, well, there's a lot of reasons why folks come, but we don't have an HR person right now. And so we don't have anybody. If someone feels like they're being harassed in the workplace, they have nobody to go to. The president has been handling HR issues. Okay, well, if that's bad, that's unquestionably bad. You should not have to go to the president to report a sexual harassment issue, especially what if that's the person that's involved in the, like, you can't do that. So we need to have an HR person, and Paizo is now got that job posted. And they added union experience to that job's requirement.
there you go.
So,
All right.
so we're going to so this is an ongoing process. We'll get an HR person in our company who can help ensure that these anti-sexual harassment policies get put in place. It's a process.
Sure.
Okay.
Oh, good point. All right. Fair enough.
I will.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So the question is, given that most of the companies in the industry, certainly in the tabletop side of the industries, are too small to create their own unions, wouldn't it make more sense or would it make more sense to have an effort for some sort of an industry-wide guilds or something that would, members of smaller companies could join?
Well, I'm going to argue for both, right? I'm going to argue for put your hands together. Yes, you're right. Most companies in the tabletop role-playing game business are like a half a dozen folks working part-time. Like they have maybe they have a couple of permanent employees, but maybe they don't. That's very normal. If we go internationally, there's more. There's companies like companies in England, for example, that would certainly have enough full-time employees that we could unionize there, but that's separate issues.
And there are a number of tabletop companies that have multiple branches that way for it, right? Like, I mean, it's the to the extent, for example, the Greater Than Games is now an RPG company, as well as a board and card game company, right?
That's right, for sure.
So,
and that touches on my larger point, which is that I think that there's related companies that all kind of form this kind of nerd gamosphere, right? And if we think about that, there's quite a few that I think could benefit from this. But that doesn't ignore the question's point, which is that, yes, you're right. Many of these companies are too small. So we need to explore ways for freelancers or part-time people to form some kind of alliance where they could come up with some kind of common practices and best practices, some standards for how much they should be paid, for example. If anybody out there is a freelance, like freelancer pay rates vary widely across our industry, from as low as 5 cents or a penny a word. I think Owen Stevens tells the story of his very first assignment. He was paid a tenth of a penny a word. for his first writing
I,
assignment.
I don't mind telling people from mine for it. I have been paid anywhere from 3 to 15 cents a word
There you go.
in my work as a freelancer over the years that I have done this.
Yeah, and
And as you
Paizo,
say, it completely depends on the project and the opportunity and
yeah,
who's providing it and what they have
yeah.
available.
Paizo
So
pays 8 to 12 at the
mhm.
moment. And that was less. It was 10 cents a word until a couple of years ago. Developers have been fighting for a long time. My colleague John Compton and many others have been fighting for a long time to get that pay rate raised. For a long time, 10 cents was sort of the default industry standard, but it was the standard for too long. It didn't increase as cost of living and inflation increased. It was, I think 10 cents was a standard for about 30 years. And just like our minimum wage, it
And by
needs to
by standard, we mean the high end,
be at the high end.
right? Like of what you got if you were experienced and
Right.
receiving regular work, right?
Right. And so we raised it to 12. We were pushing for 15. 15 cents was actually our request, but we compromised with management at 12. But and you're absolutely right. Like there's a million reasons why people sometimes you'll work for a low freelancer rate if that means they can pay you tomorrow, right? Like
Hmm.
there's a lot of reasons why that will come through. If I need to get groceries, you can give me $100 for this manuscript and I can go get groceries. I'll work all night to do it. So
Sure, right.
but if we could, but yes, if we could help to make those standards to protect freelancers, that would be. I would love to see that, and I think that
Even
Paizo,
if it were something as basic as you say, like I'm talking about a guild for this,
yeah,
where the standards that Paizo and any other companies of your size set, where we can all kind of like, as I say, it's like, well, we're not going to take any less than like what
right,
they're getting, right? Like once the industry
yep,
standard has been made something that is visible and transparent to everyone, then I think that only can help the freelancers, even or employees of much smaller companies, to be able to say, "This is ridiculous. You're paying me half of what Paizo pays their regular people." So.
there's a political issue that's similar to this, and that's the question of car emissions. So the federal government sets a limit for like how much carbon dioxide a car can put out of its tailpipe.
Mhm.
But California sets a much higher standard. Well, California is the fifth largest economy in the planet, right?
Right.
Like California, and so the automakers have to obey California's restrictions instead of the federal government's restrictions because California is so huge. And so then everybody else falls in. They don't care about California, but they have to do it because California is so big.
Right, because they want to sell cars in California or
We
whatever.
want to
Right.
sell
Yeah.
cars in California. So now a similar thing can happen maybe in Paizo, where we can say, okay, well, we're going to pay minimum 8, maximum 12, or maybe minimum 10, maximum 15. And then because we're offering that and we're so big, we can help create pressure on other freelancers to raise the rates to suit.
That's what I think is potentially the largest impact that this entire process could have on the industry, and it's part of why I wanted to kind of like underline it here at Metatopia, because I think this is
Yeah.
has every potential to be a watershed moment for workers in the industry, and I want to make sure that that's being underlined, like across the board, that people are paying attention to what's happening here.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so we're being told that we're coming close to the end here. If anybody's got any last questions that they want to throw up in the chat, otherwise, I want to make a point of thanking Jason and congratulating him. I'm told that this is going to be his last interview as the official rep here, as this is getting turned over to the board to.
I'm comparing myself to Homer Simpson going back and
Right,
I've
right, exactly. I'm done with this process. Well, I very much appreciate you taking the time to come out here and talk to the Metatopia crowd. This interview, beyond what's live here for this, of course, is going to be up in the Twitch replay available. It will also be on our YouTube channel, and then it will go to Jason Pitt's RPG Cast library. So you're being preserved for historical reference. When the Bill White of 2040 wants to come along and do some history about how this works, they'll be able to watch this too and find out what was happening from literally at the moment that it was happening. So
well, for historians, that's my dog Otis.
yeah, well, see, there you go. Hi, dog. All right. Well, thank you all very much for coming. Jason, thanks for your time. And I think we are wrapped up here. So, Mickey, if you want to take us out, thanks for coming, everyone.